project, and we're really glad to have you all here this evening. The first time I ever heard about cowboy poetry was about 5 years ago from a horse magazine, and there were some cowboy poems in it. So welcome, and I hope you enjoy the show. And now I have the privilege and the honor, I feel, of introducing two of my very favorite sisters, Dallas and Trudy.
Down in the valley, valley so low, hang your head over, hear the wind blow, hear the wind blow, dear, hear the wind blow, hang your head over, hear the wind blow. Roses love sunshine, violets love dew, angels in heaven know I love you, know I love you, dear, know I love you. Angels in heaven know I love you. As I walked out in the streets of Laredo, as I walked out in Laredo one day, I spied a young cowboy all wrapped in white linen, wrapped in white linen as cold as the clay. I can see by your outfit that you are a cowboy. These words he did say as I boldly walked by. Come sit down beside me and tell your sad story. Shot in the breast and I'm going to die. From this valley they say you are going. We will miss your bright eyes and sweet smile. For they say you are taking the sunshine that has brightened my path for a while. Come and sit by my side if you love me. Do not hasten to bid me adieu. Just remember the Red River Valley and the girl who has loved you so true. Just remember the Red River Valley and the girl who has loved you so true.
I'm Larry Arkfeld from Wairika. That was kind of important because last year I introduced everybody but myself, and I've heard about it for a whole year, so I can... Now, last year we had a super good show, and we talked about it afterwards as to why the show went so well, and we all agreed that the reason it went so well is because we had an audience that came here looking to have a good time. They were determined to have a good time, and consequently they had a good time and we had a good time. Now that's what's required of you. Do we have that same audience tonight? And I will guarantee that we're all going to have a good time. Kind of a hollow guarantee because you don't get your money back whether you have a good time or not. Poets that are here, I've already introduced myself. I've checked that off. We've got most of the poets from last year are back, and I'm real happy about that. And this whole show is just terrific, and you're going to enjoy it. We've got a new guy this year, Steve Roan from Doris. He's a saddle maker. Steve? You're going to like his poetry. guarantee you. Well, I'm sure full of guarantees tonight. Back again with us is Paulette Salvador from Hornbrook. We're real happy to have with us this year Mike Bryan from Scott Valley. Back again is Bill Roberts, everybody's favorite. Klamath River, Sayad Valley, Horse Creek area. New with us this year, but she's been doing poetry with us forever, and at Elko is June Collins from Wairika. And back again from the Shasta Valley, J.T. Martin. You'll all agree it wouldn't be a show without Roy Smith, who brought him here. Last but certainly not least, we're real happy to have him, Tim Treadway from Hornbrook. Let's not forget what we're here to celebrate. We're here to celebrate the legend of the American cowboy. And what we're doing here is not only, we think, entertaining and fun, but it's, in a way, it's serious because it keeps this legend alive, and it's so important. The legend of the American cowboy is truly international. Now, it started in Texas right after the Civil War. The veterans came back from the war, almost all of them Confederate soldiers, and they started gathering up the cattle that were running loose in Texas by the millions, literally by the millions. These cattle were wild, not like the cattle we know today. These were wild cattle. So they started to gather these cattle up and organize trail drives up into Kansas to the railhead and to ship them back east and so forth. And some of these drives continued on up into Montana, Colorado, Nebraska, Utah, and that's how the cattle business as we know it got started, is from those drives, all coming out of Texas. And you know, we kind of concentrate on the romantic ideal of the American cowboy, and it is romantic, and there's some wonderful things, and you're going to hear about it tonight. But keep in mind the tremendous hardships that these guys had to go through. We're sitting here around the campfire, as you can see. Doesn't it look like a campfire to you? Yeah, I'm responsible for this. I thought it looked pretty good. Incidentally, I want to give a special thanks to Eddie Lemus of Hornbrook. He let us use his wagon, and I think it adds a lot. Getting back to where I was, now these cowboys, as they sat around the campfire, they may have been in the saddle for days on end. I mean, they went through terrible hardships that we can only imagine, and of course it's there in the history books. But it wasn't all romantic and good times the way that we sometimes think about it. So I think it's important that we continue the legend and that we pass it down, and that's what part of family literacy is passing down this heritage that we have, and it's a wonderful thing. As I said, we're really proud of the show that we have. This year, we're especially proud to have the Gregory Mountain Gang with us. We did some poetry with them last fall, several of us, and we were so enthused about them, and these guys are so good that we asked them to be a part of our show this year, and we just couldn't be happier. Now, for those of you who were here last year, our show is going to be a little bit longer this year. We can't help it. We've got some tremendous music, and we just can't short that. And we got some more poets. So we're going to have an intermission. So if you can tough it out till halftime, we'll have a short intermission and let you stand up and stretch and so forth. And those of you who've had enough can sneak off. The rest of you come back because the best is going to be in the second half. Okay, so let's get on with it. And I'm going to ask the Gregory Mountain Gang to come out and warm us up with a cowboy song.
All the gang here would like to thank all of you for being here this evening. And before we start singing, we'd just like to let you know that the songs that we've selected are all made famous and written by the Sons of the Pioneers.
Shades of the night are falling as the wind begins to sigh, as the world is silhouetted against the sky. Shadows on the train, blue moon shining through the trees, and the planes get way from the distance. Comes a drifting on the evening breeze. Move along, blue shadows, move along, move along, move along. Soon the dawn will come and you'll be on your way. But until the darkness sheds its veil, there'll be blue shadows on the trail. Blue shadows on the trail. Blue moon shining through the trees, and the blanket wail from the distance. Comes a drifting on the evening breeze. Move along, blue shadows, move along, move along, move along. Soon the dawn will come and you'll be back someday. But until the darkness sheds its veil, there'll be blue shadows on the trail. Shadows on the trail.
The hoodies washed the dishes and he stacked them in the box. The old cook and the foreman have wound and set their clocks. That horseshoe game they're playing has to shut down in a while, 'cause the shadow from the outhouse reaches dang near half a mile. Oh, Charlie's got his guitar out, that Charlie sure can play. And it's sundown in the cow camp, it's my favorite time of day. We ate at 5 this morning, except the kid who skipped his chuck. He just couldn't eat for knowing that his morning horse would buck. Now the cook has shut the chuck box lid and give the fire a poke, throwed some coals around the coffee pot and lit his evening smoke. His expression kind of clues you that his memories have flown to other camps at sundown and the cowboys that he's known. The kid has kept a night horse up, he's down there in the pens. Plumb forgot about his feed, he's nickering for his friends. Those calves we worked and turned back out have pretty near mothered up. Just one cow left a bawling. Think I'll have me one last cup. You can feel the breeze a shifting like a cool front's on the way. Sure glad the sun's been busy warming up my teepee tent all day. Now the cowboys start to turn in, the cook's the first to go. while the night owls hug the coffee pot till the fire's a dull red glow. You can hear it all around the campfire, politics, poems, and song, solutions for the price of beef where the BLM went wrong. That strong and silent cowboy type, the one you've read about, was kind of forced to be that way when the drive's all scattered out. But he'll get downright eloquent when the evening chucks wash down, and at sundown in the cow camp with the crew all gathered round. Half asleep here in my bedroll, I can hear them night owls laugh. But that cow has quit her bawling, so I guess she's found her calf. Thank you.
Howdy. How you doing? Ain't this pretty good? We're gonna have a lot of fun today. Now, today, you know, most of all of the big range has been fenced off. So that's why there's so many ranches nowadays. And it's a little tough on ranchers like Larry mentioned there with the BLM and all that. And I made a trip to Elko. And I had spent the month previous to that working overtime, it seemed like, in my little leather shop, trying to gather up enough money to go to Elko to Capriola's and buy myself a set of rawhide reins. Well, I had this pocket full of cash when I showed up there. And I walked through the door and I looked at these reins, and I was a little disappointed because the year before, well, they doubled in price when I got there. So my money was a little bit wasted. Well, it didn't totally go to waste. People ask me, says, why do you grow that long mustache? I said, that's not mustache, that's curb feelers for when I get drunk. Now, like I was talking about the rawhide reins, there are those of us ranchers who struggle and strain, barely keeping our cattle alive. It's a wonder they make it one year to the next, a miracle they even survive. But while we endeavor to keep them all breathing, there are those who seek out their remains. The hooves and the horns they turn into glue, and the hides they braid up into reins. The skulls they make up into wall decorations. The hair goes for stuffing for chairs. There is little, if any, that's thrown out as waste. Useless parts of a cow sure are rare. Now, I've looked at the prices on some of these items that used to be somebody's critter, and to think that the parts used to be are worth more than the whole makes a cowboy like me awful bitter. But everyone knows that a truck would cost more if you bought it one part at a time. So it's sure sad to think that my cows are worth more when they're dead than they are still alive. And I'll tell you what, keeping them cows alive is no picnic. Let me tell you about this fella we had back home. This rancher back home had some cattle that he frequently lost to disease. So he launched a campaign against Zulu ptomaine, Old English foot rot and fleas, and brucella, rubella, and jock itch, and colic, and ringworm, and warts, and pink eye, and rabies, and blackleg, and scabies, and cowpox, eczema, and corns, because his loss from disease was tremendous. The gut wagon stopped there each day, and the buzzards would perch like pallbearers in church, though he nervously shooed them away. He poked, powdered, pilled, and injected, forever disease known to man. And when he turned them out, he hadn't a doubt to the worth of his new doctor plan. But he woke to find he had been wiped out. A rancher had doctored in vain. The autopsy showed that pug full of holes is cows that all drowned in the rain. Thank you.
That's kind of a tough act to follow. I read this at Elko this year. They always have a theme, and this year it was the Pioneer Woman. And I wrote this poem. It's called The Cowboy Bride. We've all heard the stories about the men who tamed the West, Some struggled harder than others, but I'm sure they all did their best. With 6 guns ablazing, men in their prime, some went on to glory and others cashed in their chips way before their time. But let's talk about the girls who stood by their side. Here's a little story about a cowboy's bride. The cowboy, he dropped down on one knee and he took her hand so gentle and said, "I'd be right proud if you'd marry me." Well, she was just 15 and she was hardly grown, but she loved this cowboy and she knew that she'd always have a home. Well, they got hitched and it was a pretty spring day. And you know, that cowboy, well, he was all tongue-tied even though that preacher was telling him exactly what to say. The wedding, well, it was nothing fancy, just some kinfolks, a friend or two, and everybody whooped and hollered when they said I do. The cowboy, well, he had himself a little spread, and it was only about a half a day's ride, and loaded down with supplies, well, he took off with his bride. Ranching was hard work, but this cowboy, he knew how it was done. And the good Lord blessed him that first year with a fine-looking son. Long, hard days and nursing a sick calf all night long, that young, innocent girl was no more, but now a woman true and strong. Together they were partners, and they worked hard to build their spread, and at last count, well, I think they had over 100 head. From 2 rooms to 5, the little cabin had grown, and pride filled her heart as she looked at her home. When she first came to the ranch, why, she could barely rope or ride, and so many times she had doubts about being this cowboy's bride. The ranch life was full of hard work and laughter and tragedy and joy, but it was you always had to have hope. But sometimes the cowgirl, she found it difficult to cope. Like the time she got word that her mama had died and she cried all through the night. I guess losing someone you love, why, it just never seems right. Time heals and life always goes on. And before you know it, well, 30 years had gone. A little grayer now. The cowboy, he stood and he looked out over his land, and then at the woman who for so many years had stood by his side, and silently he said a prayer for the girl who became his cowboy bride. Thank you. This next one I'm going to read is called The Flag. Our world's kind of been in a turmoil lately, and we've had a lot of trouble, and I felt this poem kind of said a lot. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the flag that flew over Valley Forge, was torn in 2 by the gray and blue, and who lived through 2 world wars. I give you the flag that burned in the street in protest and anger and shame, and the very same flag that covered the men who died defending her name. We now stand together, Americans all, either by choice or birth, to honor the flag that's flown on the moon and that's changed the face of this earth. History will show this flag stood a friend to the hungry, the homeless, and lost, that a mixture of men as common as clay valued one thing beyond all cost. And they've signed it in blood from Bunker Hill to Saigon and Toko Ri, and I give you the flag to the world that says each man has a right to be free. Thank you.
My name's Mike Bryan. I'll recite this if Jack Daniels isn't too far down and I can remember. You know, there's not a whole lot of difference between a cowboy poet and any other cowboy. A poet just kind of talks in rhyme. Well, we're going to do a lot of poems tonight. And this one's called Monty. It's about a big old buckskin horse I got. We left the ranch about 8:45. We packed up light to make some time. Let's hook pack old Monty and the bay mare. They sure are an inseparable pair. His withers were high. He had long legs, but on his back don't pack any eggs. His hide was yellow, his heart was black, but he could travel and carry a pack. About halfway there, by a big cedar tree, something spooked the buckskin, maybe a bee. He bobbed his head and he started to buck. The lash rope busted, just our luck. The top pack went, a bit in the rocks. The next time down, he jarred loose a box. When the whole damn outfit was in the trail, old Monty just stopped and switched his tail. I wasn't mad. I never lost my cool. Now that's a lie. And to my shame, right then and there, I changed his name.
It's called When the Clouds Roll In. When the clouds roll in and the blue sky's gone and the rain starts falling as you're riding on, you're glad that your slicker is rolled up neat and tied there in back of your saddle seat. It flaps in the wind as you put it on, and it's good that horse is a steady one, because the trail you're riding is carved from rock. One side goes up and the other drops off. You throw a glance off the toe of your boot and there's white water boiling through a rocky chute. And it's making a racket that's hard to believe. And the rain's running off of your slicker sleeve. Well, you check on the mules and their loads look right, all covered with tarps and tied on tight. Then you ride in the rain for a few hours more till you get to your camp near the green lake shore. You unpack the mules in the driving rain, and you give each one a handful of grain, 'cause you like 'em to know that it's grain that you got. When catching time comes, they're easier caught. Then you stretch out a lash rope you tied to a tree, pull the tarp out and get underneath. You build up a fire with some pitch that you found, and heap on more wood laying there on the ground. There's nothing like a fire. When your bones are cold, it's worth a lot more than a pot full of gold. And you don't mind the rain, 'cause it makes the grass grow. And it's not quite as cold as if it were snow. And someday, you know that that rain's gonna stop, and the sun's gonna shine, and you'll be too hot. Thank you.
This is taken from an episode in my busy life along about 1974. Severn sent word to us, moon's right, be marking calves and cattle. So ready for Saturday's trailer load of horses, blankets, gear, and saddle. Now my mare has a goofy name, Poco Dinky Dean it reads. I dubbed her Pink for short, a line-back red dun of sturdy seats. Gathered Pink and Ben in stall and gave 'em a currycomb rush. Their long winter hair so shaggy looked little better after brush. Found a few mud balls where cinch would go and pulled and cut away. Finally got most of them off out of path of old Cinch's play. Decided that the few now left would fit behind girth just fine. So fed them both their evening meal, would be ready most any time. Drove out about 15 miles in valley to good friend Severn's little spread. Unloaded our two dun woolly beasts, while others saddled up and led. Sun was up, and morning rather cool. What a great day to work and ride. Soon all ambling off down lane, like water following tide. Again, Ben and Pink feeling oats. As usual, first ride in spring. Neither cared to be told what to do. Their bit champing did fairly ring. Pink has her days and I have mine, when she hardly ever breaks a rule. Then I brag unto myself to have found this rare and precious jewel. Today, our communication was plumb nil. All morning we were butting heads. I wanted her to stop the jazz, but she rejected offer dead. Pink continued getting higher still, refused to think about settling down. I rode her up and down the slopes, yet that hump in her back stayed around. Were a few stragglers low in field, in dopey mud, plumb soft and deep. I offered to ride down after them to try and slow my mare's prancing feet. Lather formed on her long hair. She still gave me, "No, you never mind." Finally, in the drag back to corral, would soon dismount and rest my mind. Cattle were slowly passing through yon's last open corral gate. We riders, now gabbing and gathered, would tie up and work and wait. Well, Pink, you'll say, had my number. Had sized up situation well and fine. She thought the time had sure arrived to put that old gal up on her dime. She gave one quick high jump and leap, all 4 feet left at our ground. I grabbed for the safety strap and started sucking myself tightly down. On the 3rd jump, that old bitch had sure unhooked both my boots. Out of the stirrups they come flying back. I thought, you crazy old dumb coot. My feet kept gaining altitude. I hung on. They soon were headed back over to the ground. Fists now near buried in collarbone that showed knuckle imprints I later found. My feet hit kerplunk in front of mare. She stopped and then peered quite amazed. I had kept my head from hitting first. She just looked at me and kind of gazed. Now my death grip wrenched from grasp, the rest of me sagged down in wad. I slowly got up onto my feet like an old mad cow that's on the prod. I gave her a few sound kicks in the slats and then started to clamber aboard back on, but quickly had another pregnant thought. Maybe those mud balls had done me wrong. I now unloosened cinch, and sure enough, those balls had worked back underneath. Was much like burr under saddle blanket. She had been hurting beyond relief. With the pocket knife, I again whittled away and cut and pulled those rascals out, because after marking in lunchtime, would follow back out the same route. Well, maybe her belly yet still tender, when an evening mounted back up, she still again had humping back, could feel her muscles punch and cup. Each time she felt I'd relaxed, she'd think, I'll try that again. I'd sideways jerk her head to side and gouge her sides into a spin. She'd stumble around and near fall down and act dizzy for just a minute. Then she'd travel good a while. Soon I'd see her heart not in it. Though straightened out for a time, as to say that didn't work, in a little while old way returned, I could feel her smile and smirk. Back to barn in time unsaddled, and bid our friends upon adieu. All agreed it had a busy day, plus enjoyable and true. We loaded up and hauled 'em home, a bit disgusted with her stubborn way, and bedded down for night, was kind of puny from the jerkin she'd display. Next day, we're to drive the whole herd about 10 miles on to another pasture. So awakened with a will for sure, but my way sure felt no rapture. My mind thought, must come away so early, but body would not get up. I gave another poor excuse to rise. Nothing worked. It must have frozen up. I finally said to Jerry, please, as I struggled and tried to sit up in bed, you'll have to give me a gentle shove. I can now barely move my head. I felt, ouch, oh, so very tender, all from hanging on to not hit ground, not missed a spot, even eyeballs sore, couldn't bend, solidified but pound. Yes, I'm still vain, yet not so proud when it comes to tangling with the dirt. At my age, have no qualms for sure. We'll pull leather to not get hurt. In younger days, to grab the horn sure took a lot of razz and guff. Was a great deal more agile, too. A ranch jewel carved out of rough. Thank you.
This incident happened to me a long time ago. It was on a cool spring evening, and well, I thought I'd take a ride. I noticed my mare was feeling extra frisky when we saddled and untied. I rode her a mile through some rough terrain, and we hit the O'Neill Flat. Now, my mare was fine-tuned and well-muscled and far from being fat. Now, this flat, it was 2 miles wide and long, and I'd go there on occasion for fun, because it was a good place to ride a horse, if your horse liked to run. Well, I rode her to the other end of that flat, and well, she was feeling about half bucky. And like a fool, I turned her towards home and gave her some slack. And we raced across that flat so fast we could have won that Derby in Kentucky. Now, she was a big, stout, and powerful chestnut mare, and just as pretty as can be. And she was young and in her prime, but then again, so was me. And I ran her, about 1.5 miles, and we were nearing that flat's end. Well, I figured by now that she'd want to slow down, that she'd be low on wind. For beyond us lies some rugged terrain with lots of rocks and trees. So I pulled back to slow that chestnut down, but she overpowered me. You know, it seemed the harder I'd pull on those reins, the faster she'd run. I didn't know what to do. My first instincts told me to bail off now, but I knew then I'd be through. Well, across that rocky grade she flew, and in no time did it take her. That I knew before this ride was through, I'd probably meet my maker. And down through the rocks and trees she ran as if it were out of fate. And as we neared a barbed wire fence, I thought, dang, I shut that gate. Now, I just imagine that crazy mare running through that barbed wire with us both getting tangled and torn. Or worse yet, I just pictured her jumping that fence with me coming down on that horn. Whatever the outcome would be, I knew it couldn't be good, and I didn't need no Einstein to tell me that. What I'd wishing I'd done was my first instincts told me I should. Bailed off way back at that flat. Well, she ran at that fence going hard and fast, then came to a screeching halt. Well, I flew over her head and put over that fence like I was shot from a catapult. Well, I hit the ground a-rolling, then finally came to rest. I lay there for a moment until I caught my breath. Then I wiped the dust out of my eyes and I staggered to my feet. My mare was standing there shaking and looked like she was beat. Well, I had only minor cuts and scratches. Oh, I limped a little when I walked, and my nose is bleeding real bad, and it sort of hurt to talk. My mare was pretty scratched up and winded, but she was also sound, and her heart was beating so rapidly that I can feel it shake the ground. But I was fortunate that evening, for to me there was brought no real harm. And there's a moral to this story, folks. It's never run 'em toward the barn.
Well, I was clear above Deep Valley. It was way late in the fall. I was looking for our cattle. We was trying to find them all. It was blowing cold and foggy. Every coat I owned was on my back. And old Eldon showed up wearing just his basic western tack. He had a big gray horse, just as bronky as could be. And he said he'd like to sell him to some gunsel fool like me. Well, I saw a creature sneaking way out yonder in the fog, and I pointed him to Eldon, there beyond the big old log. Well, there come a gleam in Eldon's eye, and he shook down his rope, and he was gone before I could say, it's just an antelope. He was on him in a flash, and he roped him quick and clean. An antelope upon a rope will turn a little mean. as the big gray horse went right on by and flipped him in the air, and Eldon leaped and tied him up whilst he was lying there. Well, I was in new country. I didn't want to be a dope, but I pointed out to Eldon we had caught an antelope. Well, Eldon said, well, I'll be damned. I do believe you're right. I noticed he was pretty fast and put up quite a fight. Could barely see him in the fog. I knew it weren't a deer. These new exotic bulls around. You never can be sure. They'd never found a single cow. We were hoping they weren't stranded. And Eldon said we'd come too far to go home empty-handed. So we put our heads together and a great idea was born. We'd call the ram inspector. We'd just test old Hagedorn. Well, Harvey said that critter's ugly. He's as ugly as they come. But I think I recognize him. He just might belong to Bum. Well, Eldon said to take him. He just wanted to be fair. And he hollered Merry Christmas, and he left us standing there. So we brought that critter home, still tied up with Eldon's rope. And that's how Shasta Valley got its first antelope.
They don't have much to say as they leave the warm cabin, for it's 5 a.m. on the 1st of November. As they step off the porch, a cold breeze hits them. They look at each other and they pull down their hats and lift up their collars. And as they gaze out into the shadows of dawn, with a few stars still out and the hint of first light shining beyond those distant mountains, and fog so thick they can hardly see the horses they're gathering. As they step in the barn to saddle the horses, one finally speaks with a miss in his voice. God, it's cold this morning. His friend just nods as he cinches his saddle and all in one motion, throws his horse some hay and heads back towards the warm cabin. And as they enter the cabin and shrug off the cold, one pours the coffee while the other stokes the wood stove. The heat of the tin cup feels good on their hands as they start to discuss on how many cows they have left to be gathered in. Oh, I'd say about 25, and that's not bad, considering we have over 200 head. And as they step back out in the cold, brisk air and climb up on their tired horses, one whistles for the dogs as they start to ride back towards the rugged mountains. The one speaks and says, boy, I hope today we can finish gathering. His friend just nods and says, me too, for I'm tired of leaving that warm cabin. Thank you.
I don't know, so far it looks to me like you guys are doing your part. What do you say, are you having fun? We are too, and we're really glad of it. Let's have the Gregory Mountain Gang come out here and give us a couple of songs.
We want this evening to be educational as well as entertaining, so we're going to give you a little history lesson on where the yodel came from.
It's a true story, so you have to pay attention.
When you hear a cowboy yodeling a song of open ring, it's hardly up to hear a stirring tale. But did you ever wonder at the end of his refrain why his voice leaps in a mournful wail? No.
Why? Tell us.
Well, the story that was told me was handed down through history of a singing cowboy crying a child. Right for you, so coyotes and bucked them all right out the chute, left him spinning way up in the sky.
Well, the bronco jumped up and the cowboy came down and met at the old saddle horn. It made a deep impression, you might say, changed his life, and that's how the yodel was born.
It's a true story. up your belt now. Maybe we ought to cool him off a little bit with some cool water.
All day I face this barren waste without a taste of water. Water. Oh, day and night, with roads burn dry and souls of fire. Oh, water. Cool, clear water. Keep on moving, Dan. Don't you listen to him, Dan. He's the devil, not a man. And he spreads the burning sand with water. Oh, Dan, can't you see that great green tree where the water's running free and it's waiting there for me and you? The nights are cool and I'm a fool. These stars are cool with water. Cool water. And with the dawn, awake and yawn and carry on to water. Cool, clear water. All day I face this barren waste without a taste of water. Water. Oh, day and night, with throats burn dry and souls of fire. Pour water. Cool, clear water. Keep on moving, Dan. Don't you listen to him, Dan. He's the devil, not a man. And he spreads the burning sand with water. Oh, Dan, can't you see that great green tree where the water's running free and it's waiting there for me and you? The nights are cool and I'm a fool. Your stars are cool of water. Cool water. And with the dawn, awake and yawn and carry on to water. Cool, clear water. Cool, clear water.
I'd like to do a poem for you by Gary McMahon, a Colorado poet, a cowboy. It's called A Cowboy in Day. Morning is just a thin line in the east as you steps in the corral and you captures the beast. Cold saddle blankets, hey cock-a-doodle-doo, you buck now, you bugger, you'll break me in two. Your head gets to work in the last pass around, the saddle horses wrangled, the draft horses cut out. You shuts the gate and steps to the ground, and it's hot black coffee you're thinking about now. Then biscuits and gravy and eggs over light, and the foreman's wife is a beautiful sight, and jokes and jabs and cow boss's orders and a chew and a toothpick and you're out the door. Saddle a horse you'll ride for the day. Make sure the rigging has no extra play. You step aboard light with him all gathered up, because you know firsthand that the critter can buck. You ease him out of a walk heading north toward the dump. You'll be asking a trot when he loses his hump. You hit an easy lope on the Badger Highway. It's a cool morning, blue sky, cowboying day. And the brook is babbling down through the holes, and the meadowlark sings a song of your soul, and the wildflowers blaze any color you suppose as the smell of the sagebrush and pine fills your nose. And this horse that you're riding, he's big and he's lean, he's quick, smart, tough, and a little bit mean. His saddle's no place for the meek or the green. He's a sure-enough rip-snorting cowboying machine. And this place that you're headed is pretty intense. The Continental Divide is the back fence. There's 10,000 acres of mountain and rock there and 1,200 head to check and to doctor. And to make matters worse, or better, you think, they're all yearling heifers, unpredictable dinks. They'll run and they'll hide until hell freezes twice and kick up their heels while you skate on the ice. But this ain't no colt. You ain't no kid, so you jerks out your rope and you pulls down your lid and you cruises and climbs through the sagebrush and aspen till you find you a cow brute what's droopy and rasping. Then you tag her quick before she gets to the brush and trip her and tie her in a big rush and pack her with sulfur and penicillin. She'll turn for the better, the good Lord a willin'. Lots of pink eye and foot rot today. That doesn't mean that the buggers can't play. They've ducked and they've dodged until who laid a chunk. Still you managed to capture a pretty good hunk. One line-back heifer with a sly side dart nearly upset the whole apple cart, and a bald-faced old bag sure slammed on the brakes when you dived off the ledge and got your way. It's the heat of the day now, the sun's straight overhead, and you and your horses are packing some lead, and you hanker for a rest and a biscuit or two, and you figure you got that much coming to you. The horse likes the grass that grows neath the aspen, and the shade there's as welcome as peace everlasting. Well, you find such a place with a creek nearby to soothe the bruises of a hard ride. You hobbles him, unbridles him, loosens his girth, and set yourself back in the cool green earth. You surround your grub and drinks your fill and takes a siesta way back in the hills. Just a cat nap is all you require, but still you lay there and ponder a thought. Life sure has its briars. Take, for instance, this good old cow hoss. Why, he was just a wide-eyed, ring-tailed dandy. They give up on him before they give him to me, but it's the same for horses as it is for men. He just needed a job and a kick in the shin. The afternoon spent with the usual flair, a close call here, a catastrophe there. Still, you managed to save more than a couple of hides, but that's why you get paid for making these rides. A storm blew through for about 30 minutes, and you'd have swore old Satan himself was in it, but you're sure glad your pony is seasoned plumb through, because close lightning's unloaded a few buckaroos. And you're wet as a fish, but you ain't gonna melt, and the sun feels the best that it ever has felt, and you're all steamed up like an overdue freight, but you're dry as a duck till you get to the gate. Now, there's those that think a cowboy's a crude, ignorant cuss, but the truth is, we know savvy them and they know savvy us. But there's one chore that sticks in my mind when the job of a cowboy cussed into sublime. When you and your horse form a leathery feather and drift 2 or 3 yearlings out of the gather and trail them up somewhere they don't want to go and they're needing a vet or whatever, you know. And you set them up just so as you go through the gate, and don't rile them up, for heaven's sakes. Them that have tried it say it's kind of an art to set them in a home corral before dark. Well, you're trailing 2 home this very night. You'll probably ship one, the other will be all right. But one false move now and the air's turning cool. Them 2 yearling heifers will make you look like a fool. You punch them into the catch with a whoop and a smile. You've been walking on eggs for the last few miles. If one would have broke, the fur would have flew. No telling when you'd have got another crack at them 2. The horse rolls in the dirt while you put up your tack. Savors his grain while you scratch his back. It's an evening ritual you both enjoy. You don't covet nothing when you ride this old boy. He heads for the Timothy down by the lake, and you saunter to the house for soup and steak. And Mix it up with compadres while you finish your pie the way folks do when they're satisfied. After supper, there's little time for play. You sleep hard all night if you work hard all day, but before you fall off the log and float in the air, you might have time for a little prayer. Lord, I thank you for this cowboying day. I had me some fun, was earning my pay. And I like to think I keep meat on the table for a country that needs to keep fit and able. Now, a cow lord with no horses is boring as hell, and a horse with no cow sure don't ring my bell. And it's a good game, this life of horses and cattle, and thanks again, Lord, for my day in the saddle. Thank you.
They say this cowboy poetry is a spiritual thing. Now this here is a story I think you ought to hear about how Coogan, he and Schuyler had a line camp job one year. Well, they rode up in November just to check this cabin out and to ride around the meadows and see what cows there were about. They were cleaning on this cabin and old Coogan manned the broom while Schuyler washed the windows to let some light into the room. Now Coogan, he was sweeping when he come across this stash. Underneath his bunk, he found a bottle in its cache. Well, he set it on the table and the two of them, they stared at this jewel of Kentucky till the evening sun had flared. They discussed if they should drink it, or maybe they should wait. Then they settled for on Christmas, that's when they would celebrate. So for 50 days they waited and they talked about it every day, and it gave them something to look forward to and to pass the time away. Yeah, someone had been good enough to leave this gem behind. Now, 12-year-old Kentucky is not the gulping kind. Well, they kept this bottle dusted off. They about wore off the label, and they used it for a centerpiece to grace the evening table. Now, on Christmas Eve, the snow was deep, and the cabin snug and warm. Schuyler baked an apple pie while Coogan trimmed the tree to form. And with the dishes put away, they used their tin cups for a glass, and they sat down at the table to savor nectar. There at last. Well, they poured the fluid gently, and they raised their cups in toast to the friendships they had cherished, but this stranger got the most. This stranger that had left them, this bottle brown and clean, this bottle full of friendships, this bottle full of dreams. Well, they raised their cups to smiling lips, but lips that fell to deadpan. Someone had used their bottle long ago there for a bedpan.
I'm going to read you a poem I wrote. I guess another way to put it, it's about the girls who worked in the brothels, and I think that they have a lot to be said for help settle the West. Anyway, I titled this Flo. Now don't you know her name was Flo, and she called her home the West. A lady not quite, oh what a sight, and she called her house the nest. She carried a gun for men that would run, not paying what they owed. For your goods you must pay and be on your way, just take it on down the road. Now Flo, she had 5 pretty girls with long, pretty curls that could ease a man from his mind. Hugging and kissing, why nothing was missing. Flo's girls was the best you could find. The girls liked to walk and have little talks down by the riverside, satin and silk and sweet buttermilk, and they dreamed of being a bride. Flo, she had a horse with a surrey, of course. Occasionally she took for a ride. She liked to wear red, especially in bed, because Flo had nothing to hide. She did her best to part of the West, a woman who left her mark. Flo was proud and whiskey made her loud, and she liked making her living in the dark. Wide swinging hips and rosy red lips, she'd flounce through that barroom door, men feeling frisky and free shots of whiskey, but she wouldn't tolerate being called a whore. Piano a playing, now what was I saying? Or her hair, it was a crimson red. Wives, hold your men, these women are sin, making their living in bed. Dancing and sweet romancing, why it was all in a night's pay. These girls had charm, they meant no harm, just a little roll in the hay. Then one night when the stars were bright, a stranger walked through the door. He looked all dusty and his throat was rusty and his backside was saddle sore. His name was Joe and he saw old Flo and it gave his heart a flutter. She smiled real shy and, well, Joe thought he'd die as his knees turned into butter. Well, be my bride, old Joe cried, and make me a happy man. Well, maybe I will. This is such a thrill. No one's ever asked for my hand. No words could he utter. Joe started to stutter. No words could he utter as he handed Miss Flo a ring. Why is this for me? Why, let me see. Her voice had started to sing. Why, yes, I'll be your bride. Come sit by my side. Our future we must plan. Why, look at you, Joe. I didn't know you're such a handsome man. Well, the moon and the stars and the brothels and bars were all forgotten for just a while, with Flo in his arms and all of her charms, wear nothing but a smile. Thank you.
Poem I wrote, a horse of a different color. Suppose you've all had maybe Appaloosa in your strain, and this is about a appy called Thunder. We were all camped snug down by the lake. Jim had just eaten the last hot cake. The horses and mules were content to graze, or so we thought in our full belly days. Through the morning calm there came a shout. The horses and mules are heading out. The old red mare has taken the lead. I guess you don't like this high mountain feed. Now Jim had his horse tied to a tree, for no mountain man leaves all his stock free. He threw on his saddle, he jerked up the slack. It seemed like a second he was on the big appy's back. Now Thunder was this rat-tail's name, and spooking at boogeymen was his game. None of us there thought he had enough heart to catch the red mare with such a head start. Up through the rocks they went at a lope. Jim stayed on top of that white-eyed dope. He pulled up the reins to give him a blow. Thunder wouldn't have it. He wanted to go. They caught the red mare at Pigeon Roost Peak. When Thunder went around her, she turned real meek. She came back to camp, all the mules in tow. Behind them all, Jim led Thunder real slow. What's the matter, Jim? Get dumped in the mess? Nope. Just thought this old appy earned a good rest.
This is a good place to bring Trudy and Alice back out here for a song. What do you think?
Oh, the wayward wind is a restless wind, a restless wind that yearns to wander, and he was born the next of kin, the next of kin to the wayward wind. In a lonely shack by a railroad track, he spent his younger days. But guess the sound of the outward bound made him a slave to his wandering ways. Oh, the wayward wind is a restless wind, a restless wind that yearns to wander, and he was born the next of kin, the
like they say, it's a hard act to follow. They are good, you know? Yeah. Dallas and Trudy. I wrote this next poem just after the ceasefire over in the Persian Gulf. And I was driving along on the freeway up near Hornbrook and felt real inspired there when I saw the flag. Anyway, I call it the Hornbrook flag. After crossing the Siskiyous, I was headed back home when I saw the big flag that inspired this poem. It's there on the hill, and it's red, white, and blue. You can see it there waving every time you pass through. I noticed the end had a tatter or two. It had been there a while. It wasn't brand new. It had been there a while like America had, through the joys and the sorrows, with the good and the bad. I thought of the wars where some gave their lives so that flags could fly free in America's skies. And I thought, what a privilege it is to be free. I was proud that I'd served with our country's Navy. God bless America. I sang out that song. Then I sang it again as I drove along. I really felt proud as I went on by. Got a lump in my throat and mist in my eye. And I hope that, like me, it gives you a thrill. May God bless America and our flag on the hill. Thank you.
Now this next poem is true, all with the very last word. That's for the record. Now in this cattle business, it never seems to fail. But out of the herd, there might be one or two that can't make it to the sale. You might have a cow, say with a real bad eye or dislocated hip. For whatever reasons it may be, they're too crippled up to ship. And there are several options you can take with these animals. That is, if you have the notion. And if your freezer is already full, well, you can call it the Laotians. Now, the Laotians are kind of a Chinese breed that congregate in the town of Weed. And they're hungry little rascals and beef that meets their needs. Why, they gladly buy a crippled bull or a cow that is nearly blind. When their freezer's empty, well, they'll take what they can find. And they do a slick job butchering. Why, they even take the guts and head. All I have to do is shoot the animal and make certain that it's dead. Why, it was just the other day, one set foot upon my turf. He said, I pay you $3 for what you American call afterbirth. He said, I like to buy it in quantities. When you get 10 or more, you freeze them. Then you call me. I come knocking at your door. Well, I asked him, well, what do you do with it? He said, oh, well, a friend make a soup from, don't you see? Then I asked him, well, what friend name was? He said, oh, friend name Wally.
I see a lot of people leaving. I know where they ate. This poem is dedicated to John Brazzi and anyone else that bales hay for a living. There are heroes here within our midst, regular guys like me and you, the Baylor men who stalk the night to hunt the wily dew. You can see them at a dinner dance with their wives in disbelief, discussing how they caught the dew to work the hours of a thief. The dew, it is a phantom, it'll tantalize and tease. It sneaks in upon the darkness, and it'll vanish with the breeze. The farmer bolts straight out of bed and scrambles toward the door. He can hear a Baylor's plunger there across the valley floor. He wonders on the life he chose, the hours he does keep. It really doesn't matter now. The neighbor knows he's still asleep. He goes running out the front door with his head still in a fog and trips there in the darkness and lands upon his dog. Well, he should have married rich or been a lawyer like his brother. But he tells the old dog he's the dummy and insults the old dog's mother. The old dog loads into the truck and shakes his shaggy head and wonders why he wasn't born a doctor's dog instead. Well, the hay's a little dry, but he has to bail a lap or two. He can't have the neighbor thinking he completely missed the dew. When he sees the neighbor later, a knowing smirk upon his face, the neighbor says, "I saw no lights this morning at your place." Well, he holds on to his anger, stuffs a chew there in his cheek, and says, "My dew comes later. I live closer to the creek." The sportsmen go to Canada. They hunt the Rocky Mountains too, but you've never really hunted where you stalked the wily dew.
This one's maybe a little more serious than that, I don't know. I got this poem one day. I was over the Jespersons watching them team rope. I go over there now and then and give them a hard time. And I saw Alan Jesperson sitting on a stool next to his pump house with his dog. And I kind of just imagined maybe what he was thinking. Maybe this is what he was, maybe it wasn't, but it's how I feel anyway. As the old cowboy sits in his rocking chair staring across his land with a look of worry in his eyes, how things have changed in his time. For he remembers the years not so long ago when the rivers ran clear and the mountains had snow and there were plenty of deer. And it wasn't strange to hear the sound of a bull elk bugling in the misty clouds or hearing a yipping of a pack of wolves running close to his home, sending that familiar chill all through his bones. Or even seeing an eagle soaring high in the sky, or the sound of a lone coyote in the night. Oh, how things have changed in his time. And now as a single tear rolls from his eyes, he wonders how to be in his children's time, as man starts moving in on the land that was once his, and the wilderness whom he once shared it with. Oh, how things will change in their time. Thank you.
I'd like to do maybe a little bit of housekeeping if I could. The program that you all got does not list Paulette Salvador, and we're sorry about that, but when this was done up, she didn't think she was going to be able to make it, but she certainly is important to us. And if you saw the posters around town, it listed Carol Lee Layton. She was supposed to be one of our poets. She was here last year, but a family situation kept her, I believe a wedding or something, when she finds out what a good time we're having, she's going to think that that wasn't a good enough reason to miss it. We sure miss Carol Lee tonight. Anyhow, here's the Gregory Mountain Gang.
Here not long ago, the Gregory Mountain Gang was up on our upper range, rounding up the last of our cattle. It's cold, windy, foggy. We had the saddles on the horses, had our last cup of coffee, ready to step up in the stirrup, and we looked out across the hills and we saw a whole passel of Ghost Riders riding across the sky.
And no cowboy went riding out one dark and windy day. On a ridge he rested as he went along his way. When all at once mighty heard a red-eyed cows he saw plowing through the ragged sky. Still on fire and their hooves was made of steel. Back was shiny and their hot breath he could feel. Up all the fear went through him as it thundered through the sky. Saw the riders coming on, and you heard them muffle cry. Yippee-yi-yay! Their eyes blue, their shirts all soaked with sweat. They're riding hard against that herd, but they ain't got him yet. Oh, they got to ride forever on that range up in the sky. Horses starting fire, fire, as they ride out in their pride. Yippee-yi-yay, yippee-yi-yo, yippee-yi-yo. Riders loped up by him, you heard one call his name. You want to save your soul from hell or riding on a rein. Then cowboy changed question with a shoe by, trying to get some devil's hurt. Rusty in the sky. Yippee-yi-yay, yippee-yi-yay, yippee-yi-yay. Ghost riders in the sky.
I would like to have you guys come back out here for a minute and let someone introduce the members of the Gregory Mountain Boys. They're going to do it, or the Gregory Mountain Gang. Please come out and do it now, guys. And I'm sure you can understand why we're so excited to have them as part of our show this year.
Our lead singer is Richard Cook, the real cowboy in the group. Standing next to him is Tim Willis, Wairika's King Lieutenant. And Greg Ressick on bass. And then on the piano back there, that's Lazy Larry Shaw. Standing right behind me, hiding here in the slicker, is Dana Bacon. And last but not least, we trapped Warren Breyer back here to run the volume knobs. Mike Healy.
Thank you so much. Hey, we're real happy to have him. You know, you got kind of a lot of power when you're up here with the mic and you're all here. Do about anything. Jimmy, are you over there? Jimmy Mattin's over there. I got a call in for you, Jim. I'll have that horse ready for you to shoe, or I'll bring him to you. That's going to take us into intermission, but please don't go. We've got a lot of good program afterwards in 15 minutes. But stand up and stretch and use the facilities if you need to, and come back. We hope you're having a good time.
Take it back!
Take it back. You take it back, I take it back, he takes it back. Take it back. Cowboys take it back.
When you don't recycle, the earth will be trashed and the garbage cans will be filled and stuff.
Let's all take it back.
Yeah, take it back.
Take it back!
There's a point to all this. Take it back, take it back, take it back, take it back. Buy stuff that's recycled. Recycle the stuff you buy. Take it back.
Siskiyou County at the top of California. The year-round outdoor recreational opportunities are endless. Picnicking, golf, swimming, whitewater adventures, fishing, mountain climbing, spelunking, horseback riding, backpacking, photography, rock hounding, gold mining, snow sports, flying and gliding, visiting historical sites, attending celebrations, square dancing, dining, and just plain relaxing. The list goes on and on. Siskiyou County today is a nearly perfect year-round outdoors experience. Served from the north and south by a major interstate freeway, it is very easily accessible. Yet to the east and west, parts of it remain as they were centuries ago. About the best thing we can suggest is to visit Siskiyou County and return again and again.
Sitting around a kitchen table and talking about how cowboys and the culture of cowboy culture and Native American culture sometimes intertwine. And we were trying to think of a song that could show that. And so they chose Shenandoah, and I hope you enjoy it.
She's bound to leave you away. You roll
Boys, you know Moon and me was partnered up for years. And I've got to say a word or two if I can fight the tears. Now Moon will understand if we make this some quick. Them cows are run to hell and gone all up and down this creek. And boss, I'd take it kindly if you could say the prayer. Old Mooney thought the world of you, said you was always square. And Billy, when we're finished, could you sing that old church tune? You know the one, Amazing Grace. It meant a lot to Moon. As Moon has crossed that last big range and left me here alone. And boys, I don't mind telling you, my heart's plumb turned to stone. That lightning storm came up so quick, Moon didn't shed his gun. I believe the strike that killed him caused the cows to make the run. Killed him and his hoss together in one great blue blinding flash. Them cows was up and running before we even heard the crash. They run him down to ribbons and his hoss in the saddle too. And every cow in that stampede flashed horns that glowing blue. St. Elmo danced his cold blue fire in every longhorn head. But before I even seen him jump, I knowed old Moon was dead. He came out from Kentucky when he was just a kid. He always had the makings, usually claimed I never did. Old Moon was plumb good-natured, pretty near always wore a grin. He seemed to hunt the good side of hosses, life, and men. If Mooney told you something, you could bet your poke it's true. And he'd side you in a tight spot and probably josh you through. He plumb sure savvied hosses, and he sure did know the cow. If St. Pete's a needin' top hands, well, he's got one coming now. Well, Moon, we've got to gather cattle. I'm gonna miss you, pard. But I know you'll have the latch string out when I play my last card. Don't play no tricks on them angels, or leastwise don't get caught. And keep the makins always handy and the coffee good and hot. Boss?
Oh Lord, this man, we're simmons, the best we got to give. It's hard for us to see right now why old Moon couldn't live. But Lord, you know your business, and we just send a word. And who you need to help you when your trail in heaven's hurt. I've put old Moon out there on point. There ain't no better hand. I know he'll learn them trails of gold, just like he knew this land. Just give old Moon a string of romps. Please don't fence him in. He's used to big sky rages. Well, thank you, Lord. Amen.
Billy?
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see.
Adios, compadre.
We're going to tell you about an old friend of ours who lives down Texas way. His name is Bill. He's got a little old ranch down there that's, well, I guess it's not a little old ranch. It's big enough to contain the entire Pecos River inside of it. So they call him Pecos Bill, and we're going to tell you a little story about him.
Pecos Bill's quite a cowboy down in Texas, Western Superman to say the least. Why, he's the roughest, toughest critter, never known to be a quitter, 'cause he never had no fear of man or beast. So yippee-yi-yay, yi-yay, yippee-yi-yo, he's the toughest critter west of the Alamo.
Pecos rolled a raging cyclone out of nowhere. He saddled it, straddled it with ease. A wild cyclone bucked and
way while traveling on the desert. It was 90 miles across the burning sand. He knew he'd never reach the border if he didn't get some water. So he got a stick and dug the Rio Grande. So yippee-yi-yay, yippee-yi-yo. He's the toughest corridor west of the Alamo. While the tribe of painted boots did a war dance, they never started shooting up the game. Gave those rescues to the shake-up that they jumped out of their makeup. That's how the painted desert got its name. So yippee-yi-yay, yippee-yi-yo. He's the toughest corridor west of the Alamo. While reclining on a cloud high over Texas, with his guns he made the stars evaporate. Why he watched them all declining, when everyone brightly shining right there, the emperor of the Lone Star Texas State. So yippee-yi-yay, yippee-yi-yo, as the emblem of the Lone Star Texas State.
Everybody's been talking all night about a tough act to follow. Sick 'em, Blue. Sick 'em. How many of you folks out there, can I get you to shut that spotlight off for a second? Take the spotlight off for just, thank you. How many of you folks out there have got cow dogs? No, raise your hands. Raise your hands so I can see. By God, I'm glad I bought stock in Purina. Okay, lights. Thank you. You know how when you drive up to one of these ranches where they got cow dogs, there'll always be some old black, fat, blind potlicker come rolling down off the porch and stick his cold, wet nose in your car door just about the time you get ready to step out. It's a little exciting for a lady, but especially if she's wearing a skirt. But them old dogs, you know, when you're trying to get out, they're such a nuisance. You wonder why that old stinking dog is still around. Well, I'll tell you why. At one time in that dog's life, he was just the apple of his owner's eye. At one time, he was just a cow-eating machine. And if you don't believe me, just ask the owner. He'll tell you all sorts of good stories about that old dog. And them dogs is, you know, they're blind and they're fat. And they're so blind, you wonder how they get fat. Well, I'll tell you why. You see, they've memorized where all the cat food is. Of course, it's been processed through the cat first, but who cares? And you know, it don't matter what color them dogs are when they're born. When they get old, they turn black. Just like bananas in the refrigerator. Now, we had a dog like that at home. And this is kind of a sad poem, too. I wanted to throw it in here now because it is a serious poem. Now, Old Blue was a cow dog deluxe. Just a nose-eating wizard at least. There wasn't an ounce of fear in him. He'd chew on both human and beast. And if there weren't nothing to chew on, then by God, he'd chew on himself. He could eat up his own weight in dog food and be found by the way that he smelled. But his cow working days were all over. And he couldn't go with me no more. Too blind and too fat to go with me, so he just laid around on the porch. Till at last that sad day overtook him. Old Blue, he was no longer sound. So I grabbed up my gun and went outside, but Old Blue was nowhere to be found. I searched through the fields and the meadows, and I looked in the barn where he lay. And I peeked in the back by the swing set where he and the kids used to play. I found him at last in the horse pen. He'd gone on to his final retreat. He turned into a pile of horse apples, just proving you are what you eat.
Okay. This poem I'm going to do is called Past Karen. I didn't write this poem. It's an Australian poem, and it was introduced to the Elko gathering, I believe, about 2 years ago. I only wish I could talk like an Australian, because this poem was really quite powerful when it was read. It's about the pioneer woman of the Australian outback, and they had a tough life, and I'm sure some of them still do. Anyway, this is called Past Karen. Now up and down the sidling brown, the great black crows are flying, and down below the spur I know, another milker's dying. The crops have withered from the ground, and the tank's clay bed is glaring, but from my heart no tear, no sound, for I have gone past Karen. Past worrying or Karen, from my heart no tear, no sound, for I have gone past Karen. Through death and trouble turnabout, through hopeless desolation, through flood and fever and fire and drought, and slavery and starvation. Through childbirth and sickness and hurt and blight and nervousness and scaring, through being left alone at night. I've come to be past Karen. Past bothering or past Karen, past feeling, past Karen. Through city cheats and neighbors' spite, I've just come to be past Karen. Our first child took in days like these a cruel week in dying, all day up on her father's knee or on my poor breast lying. The tears we shed and the prayers we said were awful wild and despairing. I pulled 3 through and I buried 2, and since then I'm just past Karen. I've grown to be past Karen, past looking up, past Karen. You see, I pulled 3 through, but I had to bury 2, and since then I'm just past Karen. 'Twas 10 years first, then came the worst, all for a barren clearing, and I thought my heart would burst when my man went sharing. He's droving in the great Northwest, I don't know how he's faring. And I, the one that loved him best, have grown to be past Karen. I've grown to be past Karen, past waiting, past worrying. That young girl that waited so long ago has lived to be past Karen. My eyes are dry and I cannot cry, and I've got no heart for breaking, but where it was in days gone by, it's just a dull and empty aching. My last boy, well, he ran away from me, and I know that my temper is wearing. But now I only wish to be beyond all signs of Karen. Past worrying or Karen, and past feeling and past despairing. That young girl that waited so long ago is beyond all signs of Karen. Thank you.
Most of us write our own stuff, or a lot of their own stuff, and you sit down to try to write something and it don't come to you, and then anyway, I was trying to write a poem and it didn't work. I got mad and I just started writing. This is kind of what come out. This is a true story called Black Bear. At the edge of the light, just out of sight in the dark, as black as coal, an old sow bear with jet back hair pulled at a buck on a pole. Her intent was clear, or she wouldn't have come near a place where humans camped. She wanted to eat the sweet red meat just out of the light of the lamp. I shined a light into the black of the night to see her face so clear. She stood her ground without a sound and ate some more of the deer. Her teeth were broke, and that's no joke. She had been around for years. Her breath smelled bad. She looked so sad. Her eyes were full of tears. The buck was mine, with horns so fine, I'm not about to share. There's an impasse here, I greatly fear. Me and an old sow bear. Get out of there, you mangy bear, or I'll shoot you in the head. She looked at me as if to see if I meant what I had said. She jerked off a ham and went on the lamb across the creek in a flash. She almost sank, then made the bank. The bullet made a splash. Her escape was complete. She had the meat. I didn't have time to mourn. She left me some, that's better than none. After all, I had the horn.
Hearing that one about the bear, I wasn't even going to do one this time, but I wrote this a couple years ago and I never memorized it. I hope I finished it, but anyway. I might as well do it. I'll kind of read it to you. Well, first I got to tell you about it. Anyway, we were on Yukonom Creek, and we were going to camp this one spot about 4 miles up, and we just got there and this bear came wandering through there. We were going to be going on up the trail further that day, and I thought, well, let's see what he's all about. You know, it's going to be pesky and have to hang our food or what. And so I walked off in the brush there a ways, followed him. I got out there, it was getting kind of thick, and I thought, well, this is kind of dumb. And all of a sudden I heard this sound. The old bear was just growling and roaring and clawing at the tree and everything, and I got kind of nervous, and then I got real quiet. And I looked, and that bear went like this. He looked out from behind the tree, and then he went back here and he making all this racket again, and I got quiet, and then I went. And he looked out the other side, and about that time my dog came over and ran him off. But anyway, I wrote this poem, and it's called The Bear. Thanks, Mike. One day while up the Yukonom, a black bear I espied, a-running through the timber and up the mountainside. I followed him a little ways to see what he would do. About when I thought I lost him, I heard a sound or two. And then I heard an awful sound. I thought I might be dead. The chills ran right on up my spine. My hat raised off my head. It's on the back. I heard his claws of terror and the bark right off the tree. I heard that bear growling and roaring right at me. 40 feet away from me, kind of up the hill, he was behind a big old fir. Then suddenly, it got still. I saw some shaggy hair appear from behind that tree. Then I was looking at his face while he looked for me. Then back he went behind the tree. The noise began again. God, it was an awful sound. I thought it wouldn't end. One more time, the quiet came, and one more time, he peeped. He was trying to scare me off, and he damn near did succeed. Thank you.
Poem that I wrote quite a number of years ago. And we have lived in northern Siskiyou County, California, the valley of Mount Shasta, most of our married life. And the many changing faces and the shadows of the mountain, which are ever present, add to his magnetic charm and beauty. One November morning, after a light skip of snow, the outline of giant horses' footprints on the side of the mountain shone to our elation. There always seems to be a need for another picture, and as the mood of the mountain are many, this time, after getting the prints back, was so pleased that I had them enlarged. The following poem is a result of the many thoughts while studying this picture. My thoughts first turned to other legends, which I shall repeat. Minnesota has its Paul Bunyan, with Babe, the mighty big blue ox. They tamed the darkened wilderness long before the Plymouth Rocks. Humboldt has their Bigfoot. In logging woods he's trod. Beneath the redwoods left his prints, mashed down into the sod. Now is he a myth, the abdominal snowman? Many, they say not, have seen the hairy beast rush past and left an odorous smell of rot. Those sugar-sweet peas and beans, so tall and slender, with acres of asparagus stalks, grown only tender. He strides through the fields strong and so defiant. Ho, 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 thunders the jolly green giant. Now we have Siskiyou with his story to tell, straight out of the history to toll like a bell. And this is the legend of Siskiyou. The meaning of Siskiyou has sources threefold. Some believe it is a French word, others Indian, I'm told. The French translation, 6 hard spots and 6 stones down on the Klamath River among fossils and bones. A ford, marked for crossing, a giant of streams, to guide across safely on those fur trapper dreams. Then we have another that for itself speaks, on the mountain of Siskiyou and tribal ground creeks. So named for a cayuse horse with a stub of a tail, which roams this land in snow, rain, and hail. In legends so old, way back out of the past, a galloping so freely over land so fast. Now most of you have heard, without any remorse, the wanderings of Siskiyou, the bobtailed horse. Now maybe you doubt that he ever existed, or when being retold, became perhaps twisted. No longer be doubters with tongue in your cheek, as proof of the pudding leaves no need to speak. For Siskiyou ranged high, way up on the mountain, and kept mares closely checked, continually accounting. With wings on his hoofbeats, he cavorts about, over high ridges and down into gullies, no doubt. His hoofprints remain, the frog shows in his track. 'Tis planted like bronze to prove us a fact. How Siskiyou roams the slopes of all of Mount Shasta, to this county so named to be retained ever after. He left his mammoth prints on Shasta's gorgeous flanks, ascended elevations, paused, and jumped the red banks. Seeing horse tracks embedded, showing so plainly in view, becomes meaningful clear as brought into focus anew. They're so plainly emblazoned and clearly engraved on the side of Mount Shasta to be forever enslaved. By a horse of great size and made to perfection, you turn and look back for a glimpse, a reflection. A bright buckskin was Siskiyou, his hide shone as gold. On that snow misty morning when he was bold, when the sun rises, spots still glint through the trees, reflecting his presence upon the crystals of freeze. Living out his long life, way up high on the slope, his shadows seen drifting among clouds as they float. You'll know him for sure by his bobbed-off tail. 'Tis like a rudder he uses to glide and sail. It's kept worn short from his breaking quick stops, lowered like a flap as he descends and drops. This he soon learned when by accident shorn, back on that beautiful spring and sunny morn. Shasta Valley below caused his statue of stance, his moments, hesitation in his flight from his prance. He became so completely entranced and stopped to view and let his flying black tail get tangled into old Whitney's avalanche and Glacier's cold jaw as roaring sliced past his rear during a thaw. Behold, his tail was bobbed off in the wink of an eye, long before he could vault upright into the sky. So never again will you see his flowing tail long, as he gracefully maneuvers with muscles so strong. Siskiyou will remain always with a bob to his tail, and legends keep flying as he gallops the trail. In blizzards and snowstorms, all fine weather blends. In Siskiyou's own country, on peace on the wind. A horse with iron hooves of the hardest of steel, and endurance built in like the furnace and wheel. He's larger than Paul Bunyan's ox, a breathtaking sight of awe. May see his golden height drifting outside of Darwin's law. Yes, buckskin, the color of the first breed of horse, agreed from all sightings to be that color, of course. His size and great strength acquired from his slaves. We people of Siskiyou, whose beliefs come in strong waves. We're proud of our Siskiyou, a giant with love, as he continues to watch over us all from above. If lucky, we'll hear him whinny in the dead of the night as he soars through the mist to disappear out of sight. Thank you.
Grandpa, can you tell us how things used to be? The work you used to do and the things you used to see? Well, I used to be a logger, and we always earned our pay. With the sideboss helping out, we'd make 60 loads a day. We'd come behind the fallers. They would lay the timber down. We'd make sure it always made it to the mill right here in town. And the town was really something. It had everything you'd need. It was a place to have a family that was yours to raise and feed. Some city folk come passing through, went snooping through the hills, and they shut down all the logging, and they shut down all the mills. They said we hurt the mountains, but the mountains were my friend. We should have fought a little harder. We didn't know it was the end. And then there were the cowboys. They were friends of mine. Guess they all went out of business somewhere along the line. It's the will of most of the people, is what they said to me. But I don't think most of the people ever got a chance to see. All you kids will make a living. A good man will survive, but you'll never really know how it feels to be alive.
Is that working? Yeah. This is about a cowboy's dream come true, I don't know. Anyway, he opens his eyes in the early morning light. He looks around and sees the same old sight. It was just another dream, he thought to himself. But it seemed so real, how could it be? How can one man keep having the same old dream? For the old cowboy's sad now because he can't understand why. That he's the only one left of all the cowboys used to ride with on them long cattle drives. For he remembers it fondly, just like it was yesterday, pushing them cows through the high mountain range, where the waters ran clear and so plentiful too, the grass so green and the sky bright blue, with pines that stood tall against the majestical peaks. And all cowboys knew this was a sight that no man could create. They drove them cows hard and all day through rivers and creeks and high mountain range. The work was tense and quite wild at times, but yet with a feel of freedom that only a cowboy could describe. He's had visions lately of his life, with scenes that made him laugh and scenes that made him cry, for he's put his heart and soul into this land, and now he feels it's time for him to leave. He's just waiting for the Lord to give him his reins. And as he wanders out to the front porch, walking slow but sure, he sits down in his easy chair to have his dream once more. But then a sudden sound disturbed his sleep. He slowly opens his eyes to take a look at what he thinks the sound might be. And what he sees he can't believe. For is this a vision or is this a dream? The air went still as he stood to his feet, and there before him on horseback were two cowboys he swears he's once seen. We've come to get you, because it feels it's time, and that you have passed your test in life and kept your cowboy's pride. You watched the world patiently change before your saddened eyes, and now we came to lead you back to that mountain range you used to ride. We brought you this horse, he's all saddled and shod. Now quick, mount up, for we must hurry and get back before the gates are drawn. He mounted the horse with a simple of ease and turned and gave him his reins and started to ride faster than the winds that brings the rain. When he caught up with the herd, he pulled back on his reins and saw a chilling sight, because there before him was the mountain range he's dreamed of so many times, where the waters ran clear and so plentiful too, the grass so green, the sky bright blue, with pines that stood tall against those majestical peaks. And the old cowboy now knows that this was not a vision and this was not a dream. Thank you.
Maybe the Gregory Mountain Gang will come back and give us a couple of songs and we'll change the pace. Thank you.
Now, there's one thing that a cowboy always looks forward to, and that's a payday. Unfortunately, we don't see too many of those. But we're going to tell you about one we're looking forward to now. And when I get paid, I'm going to go out and buy me a brand new pair of spurs. What are you old boys going to do with your money?
I have to make my horse payment. I have to pay my dental bill.
I'm going to buy me a new pair of boots.
How come?
'Cause I'm dressing up in style for a little while. I ought to ride into town, 'cause every cowboy pal I know will lift his steel-toe when payday rolls around. And so I'm feeling fine because there's lots of time before we're all homeward bound. To work and slave with cattle, sweat, swear and paddle until payday rolls around. What does a cowboy do when all his work is through? Just what I'm gonna do now. Put money to spend and jingle off into town and mingle with all my friends out loud. Maybe some blue-eyed gal will wait for her bronco pal to ride over the hot desert ground. True-hearted golden hair, know that I'll soon be there when payday rolls around. I'm dressing up in style for even a little while. I gotta ride. So I'm feeling fine because there's lots of time before we're all homeward bound. To work and slave with cattle, sweat and swear and battle until payday rolls around. Until payday rolls around.
We're going to slow down just a little bit.
Are you going to play your coconuts?
Might as well. Thought I'd ask. Appreciate that. Okay. You play your guitar? Wildcat Kelly was looking mighty pale, standing by the sheriff's side. When the sheriff said, "I'm taking you to jail," Wildcat raised his head and cried,
Give me land, lots of land under starry skies above. Don't fence me in. Let me ride to the wide open places that I love. Don't fence me in. Let me be by myself in the evening breeze. Listen to the murmur of the cottonwood trees. Send me off forever, but I ask you please, don't fence me in. underneath the western sky. On my cayuse, let me wander over yonder tip. I see the mountains rise. I want to ride to the ridge where the west commences. Gaze at the moon until I lose my senses. And look at hovels and I can't stand fences. Don't fence me in, oh no. Don't fence me in, oh no. Don't fence me in.
Maxwell's razor money, where early falls the dew, and 'twas there that Annie Laurie gave me her promise true, gave me her promise true, which ne'er forgot will be, and for Bonnie Annie Laurie I'd lay me down and die. Her brow is like the snowdrift, her throat is like the swan, her face it is the fairest that e'er the sun shone on, that e'er the sun shone on, and dark blue is her eye, and for Bonnie Annie Laurie I'd lay me down and die.
I wonder why I feel so restless. Moon is shining still and bright. Cattle all are resting easy, but I just can't sleep tonight. Ain't no cactus in my blankets, don't know why they feel so hard. Bless it's warbling Jim singing Annie Laurie out on guard. Annie Laurie, oh, I wish he'd quit it. I couldn't sleep now if I tried. Makes the night seem big and lonesome, and my throat feels sore inside. How my Annie used to sing it, and made it sound so good and gay. Nights I drove her home from dances when the east was turning gray. And yes, her brow was like the snowdrift, and her eyes like quiet streams. And her face, oh, I can still see it, much too frequent in my dreams. And her hand was soft and trembly that night underneath the tree, when I couldn't help but tell her she was all the world to me. But her folks said I was shiftless, wild, unsettled. Ah, they was right. For I leaned to punching cattle, and I'm at it still tonight. And she married young Doc Wilkins. Oh, my Lord, but that was hard. I wish that fool would stop his singing Annie Laurie out on guard. I just can't stand it thinking all the things that happened then. Good old times and all the past me seem to never come again. My turn? I'll come a-running. Warm me up some coffee, pard. But I'll stop old Jim from singing Annie Laurie out on guard. Thank you, Bill Roberts.
I wear suspenders too. Now, suspenders are a man's best friend. Much handier than belts. Just the bestest kind of pants gear that this cowboy's ever felt. They won't let a fat man's cleavage show when he has to stoop or squat, and you never have to wonder if your buckle's hooked or not. They've just got one small drawback. And this may sound kind of cuckoo. Just make sure that they're gathered up before you go to cuckoo. Now, like I was saying, there's a lot of these, a lot of people, they've fallen in love with, thank you, they've fallen in love with the look of a cowboy. Now, the old saloon was dark inside, but sunlight filled the door, and the jukebox thumped a country tune and stirred the sawdust on the floor. When through the door the Wranglers came, and their big hats blocked the sun, and they smelled of smoke and cattle, a puncher, every one. Well, the silk was tied around their necks in every rainbow hue, and they wore their spurs right to the bar like cowboys often do. And their tall top boots and leather cuffs, the symbols of their kind, were worn and scratched and faded from the miles they'd left behind. Well, I gazed with admiration at this lonesome, dying breed, and in my mind I thought a beer might be just what these boys need. So I bought around, they waved their thanks, and I proposed a toast. I said, here's to all the cowboys that are riding coast to coast. To one young man I questioned on the life of buckaroos, he said, you're gonna have to wait for them. We're just the fencing crew.
Oh, Jimmy and Dinny and Mike. Jimmy and Dinny and Mike, heroes of the Emerald Isles, steeraged across the ocean to develop our western wild. Gentleman Jim was a well-read man. Mike was a battler bold. Dinny was counted a right safe bet in a drinking bout for gold. They mined around and about in the gulches, managed to prosper somehow, a fact very much in their favor. Strong liquor was cheaper than now. Mickey was right fast with faggers. He bought up some cheap bottom land, pooled all of the resources together to build up the Barleyham clan. The season was moving toward summer. All of the spring plowing was through. They built up a grand superstructure to bridge the unfordable slough. They proceeded with great care and caution. Of water, they had a great fear. The liquids they used in their councils was whiskey with chasers of beer. Mike stubbed his great toe on a splinter. Kerplunk, he hit in the slough. Jimmy seized hold of one end of the rope, and Dinty seized hold of the other. When Mike gave the order to heave him a line, they heaved the whole thing together. Mike saw his future was finished. Glub made a word will to his crew. Go sell the old Hebrew of the vacant. Be sure that he pays you in gold. Present it to Father O'Ferry to pray for the priceless soul. Glub, glub, it's a tough trail you'll travel without me, you poor, unfortunate fool. Braid all of the mares to jackasses. There's going to be money in New Year's. Along came James O'Reilly. He'd been a drinking all night, a looking for Mickey the Mighty to prove he never could fight. When he looked at this sad situation, poor Mike in the trough of the slough, he made up his mind in a jiffy a generous deed to do. He plunged right into the torrent. He pulled the proud papist out. He pushed his broad back against a great tree and popped him a punch in the snout.
Well, since at the last count there was more than half the people here were not here last time, is that right? Looked kind of right to me. So I guess it's legal to do a poem that I did last time. Besides, I've had some people request it. It's called The Spare. I knew a gal down in town that had a sister who would be staying for a spell of a day or two. She liked to ride, but didn't much. She hardly got the chance. But when she showed up that next day, she wore her riding pants. So I caught the horses in the rain and loaded up the truck. Then I headed down the road, driving through the muck. My outside dual on the right had a small hunk that was gone, and it made a slight vibration, but still I drove it on. It wasn't far to drive that truck, but the tire finally went. So I pulled that rig on over. It would be time well spent. Then I crawled beneath that dripping truck to loosen up the spare. With muddy water raining down, I tried hard not to care. Beneath my nose, on my mustache, an extra large drop fell. So while I worked on that spare tire, I thought about that smell. Then drops were falling on my brow and flowing down my cheek. I heard one of those girls remark, "That horse just took a leak." Thank you.
This is called Cultivating Egos. Once upon a time, our pastures needed turning. Equipment just didn't own, so talked of time to work it before the spring's sunshine shone. Jerry traveled to the feed store and saw a sign, "Which for sale?" So loaded up that man-eater, as said, could rent before a sale. He worked the furrows side by side and had them looking pretty straight. Some of the time was going good. Others were a grunt groaning freight. He dragged and pushed him against his will, a snorting with deliberate strength. He ended up wrestling it each time as he made it turn from length. The sky began to lose its blue, and clouds started nudging overhead. He still had quite a bit to finish, so sighed to relieve his lead. He heard a distant roll of thunder, knew he shouldn't be out in field. Then he said unto himself, "We'll finish this row before I yield." To be in field with this monster, with lightning so close about, was not smart, he'd been told, as it closer began to shout. He staggered to the very end, and turned and backed her with disgust. She made the next row line up. She sure was not a living trust. He must have waited a bit too long, felt the lightning strike his blow. It rattled his every timber, and shook him both to and fro. Though he thought he surely must be dead, that lightning had struck him down. The rain was pounding in his ears and splattering on the ground. For as he backed and jerked her to make that next row hence, felt the wild chattering between his ears. He just backed into the electric fence.
Now this next story is true, folks. It happened to me. It was early in the winter. It's about the time this big old bear just about had me for dinner. Now the more I think about it, well, I might have been a fool. But it all started when my brother Rance was out riding on his mule. Well, he came running back toward the barn. Boy, his eyes were big and wide. And that mule he was riding was really stretching hide. "Saddle up your horse. Grab some rifles if you will. Let's head back over toward the old duck pond. We've got a bear to kill." So I saddled up my horse. Rance went to grab some guns. Well, the excitement of a bear hunt seemed like lots of fun. Then we rode over toward the duck pond, and Rance pointed to where he thought the bear might be. He said, the last time I saw him, he was in one of those tall pine trees. So we split up to make our hunt, said good luck to each other. We were hoping that we would run that bear to either one or the other. Well, I hunted around, I kind of made a loop and came to where I figured Ranch should be. Well, I thought that bear, he'd made a slip, and for him we'd never see. Well, about that time, a rifle shot rang out, and boy, I jumped because it sort of scared me, and I glanced to see there was something big falling from the top of this old pine tree. Boy, it was a bear, and as he fell, he was breaking branches that big around. Boy, the earth, it really shook when that drone hit the ground. Well, I had to walk around the brush patch to see the bear. He was laying under that big pine tree on the ground. Boy, he was a big, mean-looking bruin. His hide was chocolate brown. I said, boy, Rance, that is one big bear. By the way, where might you be? He said, up here. Well, I looked up, and he was 30 feet up a tree. I said, you know, that bear's starting to move a little bit. I better throw another round to that lug. He said, no, no, don't shoot him. Just let him bleed out. No more holes in my bear rug. Well, then Rance began to boast and said, I aimed right for his heart. You know, I'm sure that's where I hit him, because my bullets rarely part. And then I began to wonder, as that bear and I were on the ground, Rance was giving me all kinds of orders while he was up there safe and sound. He said, well, those are just his nerves kicking. In a moment, he'll be through. Well, about that time, that bear got up. Boy, the lead, it really flew. Well, we both pumped several more rounds into that bear's hide, and he went out away from me, and boy, I was glad. And as it disappeared into some heavy willows, he was bleeding pretty bad. Well, I trotted down this little creek and came out around the other side where there was an open. I figured the bear might come out there, or at least that's what I was hoping. Well, I could see the bear coming through the willows. He wasn't moving very fast. When he got to the edge, he humped up and took a big, deep breath. Well, it looked like it was his last. So I watched him for a moment, then I put the crosshairs to his head. Well, I thought there was no sense in shooting now. That big bear's finally dead. So with my rifle ready to fire at any given moment, I walked slowly toward that heathen. But when I got it right up on him, well, that big dead bear's still breathing. Boy, I was a-shaking then. I put the barrel to his head. I thought, well, bear, now you're gone. But did you ever try to shoot a rifle when you've got the safety on? Now, why that rifle wouldn't fire at that moment, I could not figure. But all I know is I squeezed so hard I nearly broke that trigger. And although it was a short time, a long time is what it seemed. And then what happened next, folks, was just like a bad dream. For that bear came at me charging. His jaws were snapping. His eyes spoke death. Boy, I turned around and ran and yelled. Why, I could even smell his breath. I ran upon this rocky knoll. I was huffing and a-puffing. That bear was right behind my butt, and I don't think he was bluffing. I released my safety as I ran. I turned my rifle around, and right there was that bear's head. I squeezed the trigger. The rifle fired. That bear was finally dead. Oh, but I didn't quit running. I made sure there were several hundred feet from us apart. Then Rance showed up. Scratching his head, he said, boy, that bear sure went a long ways from being hit in the heart. Well, we gutted out that bear as he laid there on the ground. Had to help the mule drag him out to weigh him, because he was 500 pounds. Oh, and Rance's heart shot. Well, it was a little low. The bullet that he thought had pierced the heart just broke that bear's elbow. So if you ever shoot a big old bear, and he's laying on the ground, and if you're not quite sure he's dead yet, you pump into him another round. And if your partner said, oh, don't worry, I hit him really hard, well, just remember what you're told. And don't worry about his future bear rug.
just fill it full of holes.
Well, you've got to go to Elko to really hear a poem. The thought was pretty scary. I'd never been away from home. But Larry said it's easy. It's really not that far. I just had to ride along. We'd take his fancy car. Well, I saw the town of Reno and all those neon lights. But Larry said there wasn't time to take in all the sights. He said he had some friends that lived along the way. Their house was always crowded, so we probably couldn't stay. Just a little east of Reno, there across the Truckee waters, lived a widow named Mabel and her 20 lovely daughters. The parking lot was full of 18-wheeler trucks. Mabel met me at the door and said she needed 20 bucks. Well, I figured they were starving. And I wanted to be fair. The girls were all skinny, and they hadn't much to wear. And that Larry has a memory, but I can add some to his fame. He knew each and every girl by her first and middle name. There was two that looked adopted. Didn't look like all the rest. But Larry said he knew them. They were two of Mabel's best. One girl came and got me and took me to the side and said she knew a quiet place where we could go and hide. Well, I was telling her my poem to the best of recollection. And that girl just wouldn't listen. She was starving for affection. I finally had to tell her, I don't know you well enough. And I'm sorry about your family. You folks having it so rough. She said I'd better go, that she had to get some rest. More company was coming, and she had to look her best. When I finally found old Larry, and I said we had to go, because we were running late for the Elko Poet Show. Larry took me by the arm, and he led me there outside, and he asked me to forgive him. He had acted out of pride. Now a lot of folks are selfish, guard their money with their greed. It's not that way with Larry. He will give to those in need. We couldn't go to Elko. We'd never hear old Baxter's poem. He'd given Mabel all his money, and we'd better just go home.
Obviously, not all of this poetry is based on true facts. Well, did you have a good time tonight? I want to tell you that you sure have done your part, and we certainly hope that we've done our part for you. I want to thank the Gregory Mountain Gang. They've just been super. You've got a really good sampling of a lot of different kinds of poetry tonight, and I certainly hope that you've enjoyed it. And as again, I want to say it's not all true, you understand. I'd like to ask Trudy and Dallas to come out and help us close the show. You've been a wonderful audience.